Welcome in. It's really great to have you joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for being here with us.
Whether you are driving or maybe making breakfast or just, sitting back with a cup of coffee, we are thrilled you're here for a very special deep dive.
Absolutely.
We have a highly complex and incredibly tense global news report on our desk today.
You really do.
And our goal for this conversation is to take you straight into the heart of the rhetoric, the strategy, and the massive geopolitical shifts happening right now in the Middle East.
Right.
But we also have a dual purpose today. As we break down this intense situation, we specifically want to help you, the listener, improve your English vocabulary and your listening skills.
Exactly. When you read international news of this magnitude, the language used by world leaders, by military generals, it's never accidental.
No, right at all.
It is incredibly deliberate. It's chosen for maximum psychological and political impact. So by slowing down and, taking a beat to really dissect the phrasing used in this situation, you not only stay informed about the facts, but you gain a much deeper understanding of the English language.
It's so crucial.
It is. It helps you see how modern global conflicts are fought in the media just as fiercely as on the battlefield.
That's a great point. And before we get into the details, we want to make our parameters for today crystal clear.
Yes, very important.
We are looking at a single source text today. It's a dense news report titled "The Persian Firestorm: Iran Defies the West." And our goal is strictly analytical.
Right, we are extracting the facts exactly as they are reported in this specific text.
Exactly. We are not taking any political sides. We are remaining completely neutral and objective here. Our job is simply to decode the language used by these global actors.
We want to help you understand the strategic implications behind what they're saying without endorsing any particular viewpoint.
Right. We are observers, and you are exploring this text alongside us.
And the text does contain some intensely charged political rhetoric from deeply opposed perspectives.
It really does.
So we're going to look at this through the lens of communication. The words these leaders choose are just as much a part of their arsenal as the weapons they deploy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Can you set the scene for us? Where exactly are we in the timeline of this conflict, and who are the primary actors involved according to the report?
Let's establish the timeline first, because it dictates the entire tone of the report. According to the text, this war has just entered its 8th day.
Day 8.
Right. That is a crucial detail. It tells us we are well past the initial shock of a sudden skirmish or, a localized retaliation. We are deeply into sustained military action.
And the actors?
The primary actors outlined are the United States and Israel on one side and the Islamic Republic of Iran on the other.
Got it.
The text notes that Israel and the U.S. are conducting coordinated strikes across Iran, focusing specifically on targeting the Iranian Air Force, and in response, Iran is launching massive retaliatory strikes.
The language used by the leaders, right out of the gate, is absolutely uncompromising. I want to focus on a phrase used by U.S. President Donald Trump in the report.
Yeah, that stood out to me as well.
He demands what he calls an unconditional surrender.
Right.
Now, for our listeners looking to build their vocabulary, let's break that down. An unconditional surrender means giving up completely without any demands or terms.
Exactly.
When we look at the history of global conflicts, that phrase carries an enormous amount of weight.
Yeah.
He isn't just asking for a ceasefire or a negotiation.
No. When a leader demands an unconditional surrender, they are intentionally invoking the language of absolute total victory.
Like the end of World War II?
Precisely. It is a maximalist demand that leaves zero room for diplomatic off-ramps. It means the opposing side would have absolutely no say in what happens to them next.
It's a deliberate rhetorical strategy meant to project overwhelming dominance.
It is, and the text details President Trump making some very aggressive claims to back up that demand. He states that Iran is, quote, being beaten to hell. He also asserts that the U.S. and Israel were looking to take over and rule the Middle East.
That's a massive claim.
Yes, but perhaps the most interesting strategic use of language is his historical claim. He writes in a social media post that this is the first time in thousands of years that Iran has lost or been surrounded by Middle Eastern countries.
That historical framing is fascinating.
Yeah.
By saying they are losing for the first time in millennia, he is attacking the very core of Iranian national pride and historical identity.
Absolutely.
He's framing this not just as a military defeat, but as an unprecedented historical collapse. But And the text highlights this. The Iranian response is matching that absolutist language word for word.
They are not backing down rhetorically.
Not at all. We see Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian responding with pure defiance. He completely rejects the demand for unconditional surrender.
Right.
The text quotes him saying, "The enemies will take the dream of Iran's surrender to their grave."
What's fascinating here is how both leaders are using this highly charged, absolute language to project strength to their respective audiences.
Yes, it's very binary.
Neither side is using cautious, diplomatic terms that would allow for a reduction in tensions. When President Pezeshkian says they will take that dream to their grave, it is a vivid, absolute rejection.
Very visual language.
Yes. He is speaking to the United States and Israel, certainly, but he is primarily using this powerful phrasing to rally his own citizens.
Framing the conflict as an existential fight for survival.
Exactly. A fight where surrender is literally impossible as long as they're breathing.
The choice of words creates a reality where backing down becomes politically impossible for either side.
It paints them into a corner.
It does.
Yeah.
Which leads us perfectly into the next major theme of the text, and that is Iran's relationship with its neighbors in the region.
Right.
The report spends a significant amount of time discussing the concept of sovereignty versus the reality of launching massive missile salvos.
Those are two great vocabulary words for our listeners.
Let's define them. Sovereignty is the absolute authority of a state to govern itself. It means controlling your own borders without outside interference.
And a salvo is a simultaneous, overwhelming discharge of artillery or missiles.
Right.
The text mentions that Tehran fired at least 8 missile salvos at Israel since midnight. So we are talking about intense, highly coordinated military action designed to overwhelm air defense systems.
So keep those two concepts in tension as you listen. The respect for sovereignty versus the reality of missile salvos.
It's a stark contrast.
Because when we look at Iran's official stance regarding its Arab neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
the concept of sovereignty is central to their diplomatic messaging.
Yes.
The report quotes a direct statement from Iran's Qatam al-Anbiya Army headquarters. They officially state that Tehran respects the sovereignty of neighboring countries and has not carried out any act of aggression against them.
The text also includes a televised address from President Pezeshkian where he doubles down on this diplomatic narrative.
What does he say?
He states, Iran has never planned, nor will ever plan, an invasion of any neighbor. He goes even further, saying, we aim to work hand in hand with our dear brothers and neighbors in the region to establish lasting peace and stability.
That paints a picture of a nation trying to contain the conflict and maintain strong diplomatic ties.
It does.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Reading a news report critically means looking for the massive caveats buried in the diplomacy.
The fine print, essentially.
Exactly. You have to look for the tension between what a leader says on television and what the military actually does on the ground.
Because right after reporting Pezeshkian's remarks about working hand in hand with neighbors, the text outlines a massive condition set by Iran's Interim Leadership Council.
And what is that condition?
They state they will not target neighboring countries unless those countries launch an attack on Iran from their territory.
Which makes sense on the surface.
Right. But they expand that condition significantly. They declare that all military bases and international assets of the U.S. and Israel, whether they are located on land, at sea, or in the air, are considered legitimate targets by Iran's armed forces.
This is a crucial strategic distinction.
Very much so.
They are essentially telling their neighbors, we respect your borders, but if a U.S. military base is located inside your borders, we consider that base fair game for a missile strike.
That distinction completely shatters the idea of a contained conflict.
It really does.
And the text points out the immediate contrast between these diplomatic statements of regional peace and the actual events unfolding.
Right. Right after the statements about respecting neighbors, the report notes that several Arab countries were targeted in drone and missile attacks.
It explicitly mentions a shock attack. It notes a video grab that shows smoke rising from Dubai International Airport in the United Arab Emirates.
A major civilian hub.
Yes. The text states Dubai's main airport was forced to briefly close on Saturday as Iranian missiles and drones were launched at targets across the Gulf.
This perfectly illustrates the reality of the regional ripple effect. You cannot have a massive multi-front war between powers like the U.S., Israel, and Iran and expect it to stay neatly contained within specific borders.
You really can't.
When you are firing salvos of drones and missiles across the Persian Gulf to hit targets, civilian infrastructure inevitably becomes collateral damage. Yes, let's define that. De-escalation simply means reducing the intensity of a conflict. And the text explicitly states neither side is doing that. The attacks and counterattacks are continuous.
Continuous.
But what is truly striking as you read through this report is the completely conflicting narratives regarding the damage being done.
This is a classic example of the fog of war.
Explain that concept for us.
The fog of war is the profound uncertainty and confusion that happens during an active conflict. It is nearly impossible for outside observers to know the objective truth.
Because both sides are controlling the information.
Exactly. Military forces routinely release statements that maximize the perception of their own successes while minimizing or completely denying their own losses.
And the text provides us with three distinct, completely contradictory perspectives on the battlefield reality.
Let's look at the U.S. claims first.
Okay.
The U.S. Central Command claims that in the first week of what they have designated Operation Epic Fury, U.S. forces have struck over 3,000 targets.
3,000 targets in a week.
Yes. Their official statement simply adds, "We are not slowing down." Hitting 3,000 targets in a single week implies a massive, relentless, overwhelmingly dominant aerial campaign.
Then you look at the claims from the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF. They state they have destroyed at least 16 Quds Force planes inside Iran.
Right.
But the crucial detail in the text is that Israel reported 0 injuries on their own side.
0.
So the U.S. and Israeli narrative is one of absolute tactical supremacy. Thousands of targets hit, enemy aircraft destroyed, and 0 casualties taken in return.
But then you pivot to the Iranian army spokesperson's claims from Saturday, and you are presented with a completely different universe.
What do they claim?
The Iranian spokesperson claims that 220 American soldiers and commanders have been killed or wounded.
Wow.
And that significant damage has been inflicted on American assets in the region in retaliatory attacks over just the past 24 hours.
The cognitive dissonance between these reports is staggering. One side is projecting an image of untouched, overwhelming dominance, while the other side claims to have inflicted hundreds of casualties in a single day of fighting.
As consumer of global news, recognizing these opposing narratives is essential. You are watching an information war being fought parallel to the radical war.
Right.
Each military is using casualty reports as a psychological weapon to demoralize the enemy and sustain the morale of their own troops and citizens.
You cannot take any single casualty report at face value during an active conflict. You have to view them as strategic communications.
Exactly.
But while the casualty numbers are disputed, the text does give us concrete information about the specific types of targets being hit. And this might be the most alarming detail in the entire report.
I agree. We are not just talking about traditional military bases or airfields anymore.
No. The text mentions 2 highly specific strikes on non-traditional military assets. These fall under the category of critical infrastructure. Infrastructure refers to the foundational physical systems that allow a country or a region to function, things like power grids, global supply chains, and water supplies.
Very important distinction.
First, the report notes that the Revolutionary Guards targeted a Marshall Islands-flagged oil tanker in the Persian Gulf. By hitting a commercial oil tanker, you are instantly escalating the conflict from a regional military dispute into an event that disrupts global economic infrastructure.
It impacts international energy markets directly.
Yes, the economic implications of targeting shipping lanes in the Gulf are massive. But the second infrastructure target mentioned is even more concerning for the people living in the region.
It really is.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araki accused the U.S. of attacking a freshwater desalination plant on Qushm Island.
For our listeners, let's define desalination.
Good idea.
Desalination is the industrial process of removing salt from seawater to make it safe for human consumption in agriculture. In the arid climate of the Middle East, desalination plants are not just convenient utilities. They are absolutely essential lifelines for human survival.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the strategic implications of hitting a water facility are monumental.
They are.
Foreign Minister Arachi states, attacking Iran's infrastructure is a dangerous move with grave consequences. But his most critical rhetorical maneuver is his claim that the U.S. set this precedent, not Iran.
And precedent is another great vocabulary word for today.
It is. In international law and warfare, a precedent is an earlier event or action that is used as an example or rule for future actions.
Right. Arashi is arguing that by allegedly attacking a civilian water facility, the U.S. has broken an unwritten rule of engagement.
He's saying they created a new precedent where targeting basic human survival resources is now officially on the table.
Exactly. By publicly declaring that the U.S. set this precedent, Arachi is essentially laying the rhetorical groundwork to justify Iran doing the exact same thing in return.
He is warning that if Iranian water supplies are fair game, then the infrastructure of U.S. allies in the region might suddenly find themselves in the crosshairs.
It is a terrifying escalation in the logic of the war. When a military targets a desalination plant, they are moving beyond degrading an enemy's capacity to wage war.
They are directly threatening the civilian population's access to drinking water.
It elevates the severity of the conflict from a military dispute to a potential humanitarian catastrophe. It fundamentally changes the nature of what is considered an acceptable target.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground today. Navigating a text like the Persian firestorm requires us to constantly look past the surface-level statements and interrogate the strategy behind the language.
It does.
We looked at the maximalist demands of an unconditional surrender, the inherent contradictions between diplomatic claims of sovereignty and the reality of regional missile salvos, and the strategic weaponization of casualty reports in the fog of war.
And by seeing how world leaders deploy these narratives in a high-stakes scenario, you move beyond just reading the news. You start to understand the hidden architecture of global conflicts.
Understanding the nuance of this rhetoric allows you to see the glaring gaps between a politician talking about lasting peace with neighbors and the physical reality of a major international airport shutting down due to the threat of drone strikes.
It allows you to recognize that when a leader brings up thousands of years of history, they're fighting a psychological battle, not just a tactical one. It makes you a much sharper, more critical consumer of global information in English.
So what does this all mean for you as you watch this situation unfold?
Well, synthesizing the core takeaways from our source text, we are presented with a picture of a relentless multi-front conflict that has moved far beyond posturing.
Yes.
It is a war where diplomatic language about respecting borders directly contradicts the military hardware flying through those exact same borders.
From the absolute rejection of surrender to massive missile salvos to strikes on global economic shipping and civilian survival infrastructure, the text paints a portrait of a conflict that has absolutely zero signs of slowing down.
We are looking at an 8-day firestorm defined by completely opposing narratives and deeply entrenched positions.
I'd love to leave our listeners with a final thought to mull over.
Yes, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to consider as you continue to follow this story, or really any global conflict. It builds directly on the infrastructure attacks we just analyzed.
Oh, man.
This text highlights a deeply disturbing trend. We're seeing the rapid blurring of the line between military and civilian life in modern asymmetric warfare.
That's alarming.
If basic life-sustaining infrastructure like a freshwater desalination plant on Qeshm Island or an international civilian travel hub like Dubai's main airport become acceptable targets, or even just routine collateral damage in operations like Epic Fury,
Right.
how does that fundamentally change the rules of engagement for all future global conflicts? If the new precedent dictates that civilian water supplies and commercial airspace are standard parts of the battlefield, what does the next major war look like for the people caught in the middle?
That is an incredibly heavy question, but an essential one to consider as the nature of warfare continues to evolve.
Definitely.
We want to warmly thank you for joining us on this deep dive today and practicing your English listening skills with us.
Yes, thank you for listening.
We hope this conversation provided you with a clearer framework for understanding the complex rhetoric and the profound implications hidden within today's global headlines. Remember to keep reading critically, keep questioning the narratives you are presented with, and always stay curious.